Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's Nature Connects TNC in Massachusetts webinar series that connects you with scientists, experts, influencers, and our partners from the Northeast and around the world. Thanks so much for joining today. I'm your host, Emily Myron, Policy Manager for TNC here in Massachusetts, and we have an exciting program for you today. We'll be joined by our Solari Fellows to take a look at how this new program has served as a gateway for two early career professionals exploring careers in conservation. The Solari Fellowship Program launched at the end of 2022 and is designed to provide early career professionals from underrepresented communities with the opportunity to work in an environment that combines a deep dive into real-world conservation projects with a broad introduction to major conservation issues. At the end of this two-year fellowship, the fellow will have a portfolio of tangible experience, an extended network, and exposure to the inner workings of a global conservation organization through local project work. We'd also like to mention that this fellowship program was created with the generous funding from the estate of Nancy Solari. We honor Ms. Solari for her generosity and commitment to developing future conservation leaders. We always appreciate the opportunity to thank individuals who have made arrangements to include the Nature Conservancy in their estate plans and work together to ensure gifts will be used in a way that will be most meaningful to you and most impactful toward TNC's conservation efforts. At the Nature Conservancy, the Legacy Club is our way of recognizing the special group of people who have included our organization in their estate plans, or who have made a planned gift that pays income during your lifetime. If you would like to learn more about ways you can leave a legacy with TNC, please visit nature.org/legacy. I know that many of our participants on this webinar today are already members of the Legacy Club, so please accept our most sincere thanks for supporting conservation in this special way. And before we dive into today's program, I want to share just a little bit about our guests. First, Tara Christian is our Policy and Partnerships Fellow. She grew up in a Boston suburb and focused on environmental policy while studying at Carnegie Mellon University. And our other fellow, Amanda Cutler, is our Oceans Program Fellow. And she grew up in coastal Connecticut and spent her first year after graduating from Brown University in a number of seasonal positions in land stewardship, forestry, and outdoor education. As you think of questions for Tara and Amanda, please enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Thanks again for joining us today, and Tara and Amanda, I'll pass it over to you to get us started.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here with you all. My name is Tara Christian. I'm one of the Solari Fellows, so I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, hopefully that's working for everyone. So Amanda and I are really glad to be able to be here today to talk about what we've been doing with our fellowships so far. We both started about a year and a few months ago in November of 2022. So a little over halfway through our fellowships, and it's been an amazing experience. At least speaking for myself, I've really enjoyed my time here, and I'm really glad to be able to share some of what we've been up to with you all. So a little bit about me. I, like Emily said, graduated from Carnegie Mellon University in May of 2021 with a degree in history and public policy. And I immediately went into education. So I worked as a fellow at the Museum of Science in Boston for a year. I have a lot of experience in education and children's programming, so that's some of my background. I did part of the Museum of Science climate change programming. So we taught school-aged children about climate change and then did presentations on the floor of the museum, if anyone has seen those lightning shows and things like that. And I also have a background in volunteering at farms and in the food system of Massachusetts. So thinking about food insecurity, ways that farms, gardens can help alleviate some food insecurity here, and involvement. Farming is a great way to get outdoors, so I was really excited to connect some of that experience to my fellowship here. So part of the reason that our fellowship, at least for me, started in November of 2022 was because it matches up with the Massachusetts legislative timeline. So here in Mass, we have a 2-year legislative session. So I had like a month or so at the beginning of my fellowship to learn about TNC and sort of get settled here. And then we jumped right into a brand new legislative session, and we also had a new governor start in 2023. So that's been really exciting time for the legislature. It's a hard word to say. And that means that throughout my fellowship, I get to follow as the bills that we submitted right at the beginning go through. And then hopefully, as I wrap up my fellowship, we'll see some of those bills get passed. And it's been a great learning experience because I've been able to see every single step of the way. And I feel like I have a really comprehensive understanding of how that process works now. So as you can see, this is a super simplified version of the legislative timeline. We have a much more complicated graph elsewhere, but it's a pretty crazy process. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of milestones within those 2 years. So right now we've had some of our bills get reported out. I'll go over in a little bit sort of what we did during this last year, and we're still working on getting them over that final step this summer. So some of the bills that I've been working on as part of my fellowship are the drought bill. I have the full names here, but I'm going to talk in plain English about them because politic language is a little bit confusing sometimes. So one of the first bills that we've been working on is the drought bill. I've been very involved in water policy here while joining our state policy efforts on this team. So the drought bill is something that would increase the state's power to declare drought and monitor water management, water usage throughout the state during extreme droughts. So actually, summer of 2022 was an extremely bad drought for Massachusetts. This past year, we've had a lot of flooding, which is kind of the other side of the coin of extreme drought. So it's a very topical bill, and I've been excited to work on that with the Mass Rivers Alliance and lots of watersheds across the whole state. Similarly to water policy, I've been working on a flood risk property acquisition bill. So properties that are in flood zones, how can we proactively figure out how to get people out of those houses before they're put in harm's way or before their property gets damaged? And can we turn that land into conservation land to help prevent flooding in the area in the future? And then a few other bills we've worked on. I've tapped into some of TNC's previous priorities. It's been amazing seeing Emily and Steve work and everything that they've been working on for the past several years. I think I've been amazed at like the relationships that they have with certain members in our legislature and sort of like building on these projects that might be 10, 20 years long of hard work and seeing, how we can keep that moving this year. So that includes the conservation land tax credit and then green budget priorities, which is something that we're part of the Green Budget Coalition, and we advocate on that every single year to make sure that in the state's operating budget for each fiscal year are included enough support for our priority administration organizations like the Environmental Protection, conservation and recreation, state parks, things like that. So some of what we've done over the past year, it's been amazing to sort of jump in. I feel like some of it has been a little bit of a trial by fire, but it's always exciting because there's always something new happening. I had the opportunity last May to testify in a hearing, which involves sort of saying like why you support a certain bill in front of the entire committee. It was a great public speaking opportunity and a really cool experience. It's pretty amazing to meet some of those committee members who are really influencing change in Massachusetts. And then we also recently, like 2 weeks ago, hosted our very first state lobby day, where we had some of our trustees come and meet with their representatives and talk about why they care about the environment and nature and sort of how their representatives might be able to support our priority bills. There are more trustees than were pictured here in this picture, but it was an amazing experience. And I think something that we're looking forward to carrying into future years. And that was something that I was able to organize as part of my fellowship. It was a goal of my fellowship from the beginning. So glad that that was able to work out. And then my other fellowship project, a core part of my fellowship was looking at the intersection between environment and public health. So TNC has amazing resources on sort of conservation and large scale projects, but the public health sector is huge, and it's something that we hadn't really been able to tap into before. There's lots of connections, but it's so big and overwhelming that it's kind of hard to find exactly where we can fit in. We want to make sure that we're being helpful and not getting in the way of other great work that's happening. So I spent a long time researching areas where we might be able to support organizations that are already doing work that might benefit from having a bigger organization like TNC behind them, or things that are kind of getting passed over right now, issues that maybe we could draw attention to, areas where no one's working on that, and there's sort of a gap that could be filled by our work. So as you can see, there's this idea of One Health, which is the idea that the health of other people, animals, the environment around us impacts our own health. Everything is interconnected, and I think that climate and environment are, as many of you know, related to so many other aspects of society. So however we could get involved in public health, that's important. I sort of looked, Massachusetts has a really big healthcare sector, so I looked into involvement with that, involvement with pharmaceutical companies, and then sort of back to our roots on green space and conservation land and how that can help increase public health and mental health in communities. So what I settled on, which is a personal interest of mine, is extreme heat in Massachusetts, which is one of our most pressing climate issues. Heat is actually the #1 killer in the world of all climate issues. And it's something that Massachusetts has been getting more and more of in recent years, and we expect to see more extreme heat events in the future. And our state isn't really equipped to deal with that. We are historically a very cold state and used to having insulation and heaters and things that deal with winter, but with these 100-degree days that are coming towards us, there's not as much infrastructure in place to support communities. So when looking at nature-based solutions for extreme heat, urban green spaces in particular are an incredible resource. Green spaces are serve as heat sinks. They help cool surrounding areas by providing shade. They provide ways to clean the air and clean the water, which are other things that are really impacting urban areas right now. And I think many communities have recognized the benefits of urban green spaces. We see that more communities that have higher income are able to support these green spaces and have more trees in them, whereas the environmental justice communities, which have disproportionately high percentages of people of color, people who don't speak English as a first language, lower income, they have less access to green space. So a place that TNC can sort of jump in to support is support these community-based organizations that are trying to provide trees to their community. Think about how we can support statewide programs like Greening the Gateway Cities that support tree planting in these areas. And more recently, thinking about where do our trees come from and making sure that we have enough tree stock in our nurseries so that as more and more cities develop planting programs, we make sure that we're not running out of trees, that we're able to provide trees that were grown in Massachusetts that are used to our winter conditions, the amount of rainfall that we have, and honestly just avoid the cost and carbon costs of transporting trees from more southern areas that grow them right now. Like we get a lot of trees from South Carolina where their weather is a little bit warmer. But if we can grow those trees in our communities, then we'll avoid a lot of these issues that come with sort of retroactively trying to find trees. So another part of my fellowship is tapping into federal advocacy with Emily, who just introduced us. So we, as a federal team, we have people in all 50 states in the US, as well as a national branch that deals solely with federal policy. And they sort of help organize us and tap us when they need us for certain things. So that's been a really, really cool experience. And I don't think that's something I would have gotten without this fellowship. Some of our priorities for TNC at a federal level are bipartisan support and collaboration between the states. So Massachusetts, being a Democratic supermajority, has an interesting role, and it's been really interesting to see how we fit into the national picture. We deal a lot with ocean-related issues and finance-related issues just by nature of sort of our state and where our representatives sit on committees. But we have worked with states. I think I've been able to meet people from probably like upwards of 30 states, maybe even more, and just learn about how all of our work connects across the country. Even, states like Rhode Island and Connecticut that are very similar to us, all the way to Alabama, Louisiana, Montana, and how we can all work together to advance some of these priorities. So right now, I've been a little busy because it's appropriation season, which is advocating for funding in the federal government. We're also trying to champion Farm Bill, forestry, cultivate certain members to be champions for environmental issues, and then some of the other things that I've listed here. And as part of my fellowship, I've been able to go to Washington, D.C. to meet with these members in person. So pictured here is a meeting that we had in October with Senator Ed Markey, and then a meeting from this past March with Representative Jim McGovern from the Worcester area. And that's just been an invaluable experience. It's super amazing to see how willing these teams are to talk with us and the trust that TNC has built. I think it's unique in our bipartisanship, while sometimes in Massachusetts that's not as necessary as in like a swing state. I think it really increases people's trust in us, and the fact that we're a science-based organization means that when we have meetings with these members, they really listen to what we have to say, and often will reach out for advice or for help with things. So I'm really grateful for my experiences in DC and the connections with some of these federal groups. And then last but not least, part of our fellowship for both Amanda and I is professional development opportunities, and really making sure that we're developing our careers as young professionals, which I really appreciate because not all fellowships have that built in, and not all fellowships are as supportive as this one is. And so, for example, I just went to the Citizens Legislative Seminar and got to do a mock Senate debate in the Massachusetts State House and sit at those fancy chairs, which was pretty fun. I've been able to go to various conferences, professional development opportunities. I've even met the governor of Massachusetts at an event at Belle Isle Marsh, and then of course going out in the field and experiencing some of TNC's properties, and playing with turtles, which is a pretty good time as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Amanda to talk about what she's been doing, and feel free to ask any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Tara. I'm just going to share my slides right now. Okay. So hello everyone. I'm Amanda Cutler, and I'm the Solari Ocean Program Fellow for the Massachusetts chapter. I started the fellowship in November of 2022 and have just hit the 1.5 year mark, so I'm excited to share some of the work I do, as well as my experience in the fellowship so far. So about me, I'm originally from Stamford, Connecticut, and I graduated from Brown University in 2021 with a degree in Science, Technology, and Society, which is an interdisciplinary field of study that analyzes the way in which people influence science and science influences people. So one of the reasons why I was drawn to TNC was because TNC also lies at the intersection of science and people, with the focus on preserving nature, not just for its own sake, but also for the impact that climate change has on communities and individuals. My background in finding connections between different areas of study and looking at science with a holistic and humanistic lens has translated really well to the collaborative dynamic at TNC of bridging silos and keeping people at the center of climate discourse. So after graduating from Brown, I worked a few seasonal jobs in the outdoor field. I started off at an AmeriCorps program in Montana doing trail work and wildlife surveys before working in a science educator role in Colorado and as a forestry technician for the National Park Service in California. These different experiences solidified a desire to continue working in conservation with a focus on ecological restoration and nature-based solutions. But being originally from southeastern New England, I wanted to shift from land-based environmental issues to coastal issues, which hit closer to home. And the Solari Fellowship has been a great opportunity to transition from sporadic seasonal work to more long-term employment, and also to enter the world of ocean and coastal conservation. As the Ocean Program Fellow, I help support three main projects, which I'll talk about today. The first is the Supporting Oyster Aquaculture and Restoration, or SOAR program in Massachusetts. The second is a Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS, Conservation Innovation Grant for oyster restoration. And the third is a NOAA award that is being channeled to TNC through the Northeast Regional Ocean Council, or NROC, for the advancement of living shorelines in New England. So first, I'm going to back up a little and lay down some context for my work. Since the majority of my portfolio is focused on oyster restoration, I'll begin with why we care about restoring shellfish to estuaries. Shellfish play an important part in the health of our estuaries by providing ecosystem services such as water quality improvement, wave attenuation, and habitat for their marine life. Even though shellfish, especially oysters, play a very important role in our ecosystems, in many bays, more than 99% of oyster reefs have been lost and are functionally extinct. With the loss of oyster reefs comes the loss of the ecosystem functions and services associated with them, like the provision of habitat, coastal shoreline protection, and water filtration. Because they're largely gone, TNC across the country and the world has invested heavily in shellfish restoration. In Massachusetts, those efforts have been focused in the Buzzards Bay watershed and Martha's Vineyard, where we have several oyster reef restoration sites. Restoration is one tool for improving the ecological condition of estuaries, but the scale of the problem is so great that we need multiple approaches, and this is where the aquaculture industry comes in. Aquaculture is the fastest growing means of food production and one of the most environmentally friendly ways of producing food with near zero inputs. As shown in this infographic, shellfish and aquaculture farms provide many benefits such as improving water quality, providing habitat and increasing biodiversity, and supporting livelihoods. So in addition to shellfish restoration, TNC has an interest in promoting sustainable shellfish aquaculture through its global aquaculture program. Because TNC believes that when aquaculture is sited and managed well, a farm can provide many of the same benefits as a functional reef. As a result of the Nature Conservancy's interests in both restoration and aquaculture, TNC and Pew Charitable Trust started the SOAR program during the pandemic, SOAR standing for Supporting Oyster Aquaculture and Restoration. Many of you have already heard of SOAR, but to give a quick summary, through the SOAR program, TNC bought oysters from aquaculture farmers that couldn't go to market because of restaurant closures during the pandemic and planted them on already permitted restoration sites. This program was a large success and has been funded a second time to continue to build resilience into the aquaculture industry and improve the ecological condition of our estuaries. So for the second round of SOAR in Massachusetts, a lot of my work has been focused on collaborating with project partners in Fairhaven and Martha's Vineyard to plant more oysters and think about the future of the SOAR program. A lot of this work has been focused on contracting with local growers, figuring out pricing and timelines, determining which oyster products to accept and how much to accept, and strategizing on how to include more growers. In the past, we've purchased oversized or ugly oysters that couldn't go to market, known as single adult oysters, but we're interested in also developing a program where growers raise oysters specifically for restoration using remote set methods or spat on shell. To explain what spat on shell is, when oysters reproduce, their larvae floats in the water column until they find a safe home to settle on, which can be any hard surface. So when we use spat on shell, we're allowing the larvae or oyster spat to settle onto shells in a nursery setting and then transporting the shell in bags to a site where the oysters can continue to grow. And this significantly increases the number of oysters we can use for restoration. So we're trying to see what that can look like in Massachusetts for the SOAR program. So here on this slide, I have a couple images from each of the SOAR sites that are being funded the second round. In the photo on the left, you can see us planting oysters at a restoration site in Fairhaven just a couple months ago. And in the photos on the right, you can see us doing some shoreline profiling with project partners on the vineyard. Shoreline profiling is a type of monitoring where you measure the depth of the shore as you move seaward to track changes to the coast like erosion or sediment accumulation, which is useful information for understanding how shellfish restoration interacts with the shoreline, and in this case is also a funding requirement from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. But through this mixture of in-office and on-the-water work, I've been able to build relationships with a number of different partners and gain exposure to different types of work within the coastal conservation space. While the first round of SOAR was definitely a large success, a limiting factor for SOAR in Massachusetts was that there were not enough restoration sites already permitted in Massachusetts to accommodate the overwhelming interest in the program. As a result, TNC applied for a Conservation Innovation Grant under the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP, to permit several new restoration sites in Massachusetts. And this brings us to the next project that I work on, which is the NRCS Conservation Innovation Grant for oyster restoration in Massachusetts. NRCS within USDA is committed to supporting primary producers for practices that improve environmental conditions. In nearby Rhode Island, NRCS is funding growers to become restoration practitioners. They're interested in doing this in Massachusetts, but there's limited access for the growers in Massachusetts because of the lack of restoration sites. Therefore, we're actively pursuing the establishment of new restoration sites with the ultimate goal that we work with NRCS to establish a more formal program like EQIP in Rhode Island. So the goals of this project are to acquire permits for more sites and then document the process for replication in other areas of Massachusetts. Because of how waters are governed in the state of Massachusetts, we've been taking a town-by-town approach, meeting with different stakeholders at the local, state, and federal levels all along the coast to find the areas that are most suitable for oyster restoration. Since many of the areas that are suitable for oyster restoration are in areas with high likelihood of user conflict, the most important piece of this project has been stakeholder engagement. So in the past year and a half, we've met with a number of towns, aquaculture representatives, and agencies to create buy-in for a farmer-based restoration model. We've been in discussion with towns about how the goals of restoration might tie in with town water quality goals. We've been exploring with growers their level of interest in participating and how they might build some amount of oysters for restoration into their business models. And we've been presenting to representatives from the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries and NRCS at regional conferences, annual meetings, and staff days to talk about the importance of restoration at scale for biodiversity and estuary health. On the right, you'll see a short list of some of the many different stakeholders we've been in regular contact with as we've moved forward with this award. These conversations have been useful in understanding some of the challenges and opportunities in trying to do shellfish restoration at the watershed or state level and have been beneficial for practicing relationship building. We're actually in the process right now of permitting these additional sites, but there will be a webinar in the future more specifically on this NRCS work and the site selection process. And then a short note about the last project for the advancement of living shorelines in New England. We've been working closely with the Consensus Building Institute, or CBI, NROC, NOAA, and the Massachusetts Office of Coastal Zone Management, among many other partners, to convene academics, practitioners, and regulators to discuss regulatory challenges, mitigation opportunities, and habitat trade-offs of living shoreline projects. A living shoreline is a management practice that's often referred to as green infrastructure as opposed to traditional gray infrastructure like seawalls, and it provides erosion control benefits while protecting, restoring, or enhancing natural shoreline habitat, and also uses strategically placed structural organic materials like plants, stone, and stand fill. Although the shellfish restoration and living shorelines work remain separate, they're increasingly brought up in related conversations as components that could eventually go hand in hand if shellfish restoration sites are designed with coastal erosion in mind. And it's been great to see the ways in which all these distinct projects complement each other. But the fellowship hasn't been all project work. There have been lots of professional development opportunities, such as field days like tracking bog turtles in the Berkshires or monitoring easement properties on Tuckernuck Island in Nantucket. I also spent several days in Nebraska for Staff Enrichment Week, which is an internal professional development opportunity where TNC staff from all around the world convene to develop their organizational and global conservation knowledge, enhance their professional skills, network, and participate in hands-on activities and field trips like beekeeping on the left or searching for insects on the right. Even in the middle of the country, far from either coast, there are people from Alabama, New Jersey, and other states working on similar innovative shellfish restoration projects that were eager to share recent developments. And this touches on one of the best parts of this coastal conservation work, which is that we get to collaborate with many different partners and states on similar goals and environmental issues. And it also touches upon one of the best parts of the fellowship and getting to work at TNC, which is going to be part of such a vast network of interesting and passionate people doing really amazing things around the world. So I'm going to stop my share there, and thank you.
Thank you both so much for sharing your incredible work and knowledge with us. That was great. It was really interesting to hear what you've been able to work on during your time at TNC and the broad range of things that you've had the opportunity to be exposed to. And I hope that this provides our audience with a little window into the many types of careers available in conservation. So it's time to dive into our questions. So just as a reminder, please enter any questions you might have in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we've had a few already, so we'll jump right in. I'm going to start with one. Just with the two of you, I know it was intentional to have two fellows at the same time so that you could have a cohort together. And so I was wondering if you could just share a little bit about what that's been like for you, and if you two have been able to work on any projects or professional development opportunities together.
I can go if you want. So I think, yeah, that's been a really important part of the fellowship. Even though we might not overlap as much, and we still overlap a little bit because there's a lot of policy related to the SOAR program and vice versa. But it's really nice to have someone who's also new to TNC, who's also kind of like new to this field in general. TNC is a really big organization, and so like parts of it can definitely be intimidating to learn about. And then there are also so many great professional development opportunities, so it's really nice to sort of have a buddy to go to those with. We had the opportunity to go to a workshop together for a few days in New Hampshire. We've been to several sort of events at night, celebrations together. So there's definitely been like a lot of time for us to still work together and get to know each other. And yeah, I think that's been a really great part of this experience.
Yeah, I'll just add that it's been great being part of a cohort, especially for these professional development opportunities. I'll add that we also went to Earth Night together, been to board meetings, Green Drinks, which is a networking opportunity in the Boston area. And I even attended a lobby day training that Tara hosted to learn more about the policy world, and it was really awesome.
Great, thank you both. Jeff Goldman, I see that your hand is up. So if you'd like to ask your question live, you're welcome to.
Oh, no, I'm just having a hard time hearing.
Oh,
Just have, but I had a hard time hearing during the presentation. That's all.
oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Has it gotten better? Is anyone else having a hard time hearing us? Okay, well, maybe Tina behind the scenes can just make sure that everything is good to go here. But thanks, sorry about that, Jeff. All right, so I'm going to shift over to some of the questions that were put into the Q&A box. So the first one is for you, Tara. It is about what you found to be different between meeting with politicians in the federal versus state government, and whether you have a preference for working with one or the other.
It's a good question. It's funny, I was just having a conversation with a state senator yesterday about this. I think when you're in college, a lot of problems seem like they're on a worldwide scale. There are, there's huge global problems that you want to get tapped into, and it seems like the US federal government is the best place to get involved to make change. And I think something I've learned from this fellowship is just how much I like working at the state level and sort of yeah, the difference in culture around that and the like scale of problem solving. Actually, it's almost really encouraging to work at the state level, whereas I feel like sometimes federal politics can be very discouraging. There's a lot more collaboration. Part of that is because Massachusetts, like as a smaller state, and also with a Democratic supermajority, it has sort of less contention in some ways, although people are still very, very active, love debating each other just as much as in other places. but I think it's someone who's like a state representative or a state senator, they do this because they love their community so much. There isn't as much sort of ambition or like glory attached to that position. And so I found that they are willing to be very, very active participants, which is amazing. The federal politicians are too. Like I've been really pleasantly surprised by how much they care and how much they're willing to listen to constituents. But I just, yeah, because I feel like you don't think of that when you're learning about government and all of this. That's been like sort of the best surprise. So I guess I would say I prefer that, but both are good.
Awesome. Thanks, Tara. And Amanda, here's one for you. How often do you get to work in the field? And what would you say is your biggest takeaway from that hands-on work?
Yeah, I would say I get the opportunity every couple months, I'd say, to go into the field. It's not super regular, but at least yeah, once a month, once every 2 months, I'm on a boat or in the water with my team. And it's definitely been really informative to see, I guess, what it's like in person. I think, when we talk about site suitability, it's easy to say, like, look at a map and think like, okay, this is the best location based off of these factors, or like engage in conversations and think like this might be the best site based on these factors. But really getting to experience it in person and get boots dirty, literally, is a totally different experience and helps inform the decision-making processes at all levels.
Thank you, Amanda. We have a lot of really good questions, so I'm going to jump around a little bit here. And then Peter, I see that you have your hand raised, so I'll ask one more from the Q&A and then I'll pop over to you. This attendee says, great presentations. What's one unexpected thing you've learned during your fellowship? And what do you think that will help you going, or how will that help you going forward?
That's a really great question. I feel like I wish that I could think a little bit longer on that. I think this is just something I'm just learning like as a new career person in general, but how much COVID and also like recent years and sort of shifts in who's in the workplace are affecting all of this work and sort of like the cultural changes around it. And just that I think there's a lot of important things happening right now that are going to affect our careers in the future, like in a good way. So like, for example, Zoom as a concept and just things being more open and accessible and like public meetings being accessible and things like that. It's been surprising to learn how things were done before the pandemic and sort of like what people were used to, because in a ways I think like a lot of the stuff we see now with accessibility of information and things is really encouraging. And yeah, I'm intrigued to see how that changes as more and more people return to the workplace.
Something unexpected for me is that because Massachusetts has such a strong history of fishing, I thought that doing this Oceans Program Fellowship would be sort of hyper local and very focused just on these Massachusetts towns. But it's been really interesting to see all the opportunities for collaboration on the regional scale and even the national scale and the global scale. Like for our NRCS project, we work pretty regular, and for the SOAR project, we work pretty regularly with a staff scientist who spends their time in Australia and like the Netherlands and China, as well as Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And just to see that these issues are cropping up along the coast everywhere and that there are so many people involved in working on them has been really eye-opening and also really exciting because I was in my mind, I had thought like this is a Massachusetts problem, but it's like it's really everywhere. And getting to work with people who are also really tuned into these issues is exciting.
Thanks. It's really cool to get to hear from you both about some things that maybe we would take for granted by not coming in and having fresh eyes. So thank you. Um, Peter, if you'd like to come off mute and ask your question, you're welcome to.
Oh, great. Yeah, I was curious how you folks found the Solari Fellowship. I mean, it's a pretty small little piece in the world out there. I'm just here, how did you end up coming here? Did you have TNC in mind already, or was this just something that came up from some job sites? Just curious how you got here.
Awesome. Great question. Tara, looks like you came off mute. Do you want to get us
Yeah.
started?
Yeah, sure. I was really interested, I think, coming from like climate education in doing something that was like solely climate related and not having to do other random stuff throughout the day. And so I was scouring the web for climate related jobs in Massachusetts, and specifically water policy has always been interesting to me, and dam removal. So um, it actually I'm super grateful for the people who responded to me, because I sort of just ended up reaching out to random government officials in Massachusetts and asking them, like, how can I help with this work that you're doing that I'm following on social media? And the head of the Division of Ecological Restoration responded to me and pointed me to this fellowship. And then I got to work with her later in my fellowship. So that was pretty cool.
For me, I had had my eye on TNC for a while and had been applying to different opportunities also within the coastal space, but also within mapping, within forestry. I really believe in TNC's missions and values as an organization and wanted to get involved.
Along those lines, Peter, great question. Thank you. I think it's a good segue to another question that we got, which is, what advice would you have for other young people that are interested in pursuing a career in environmental work? I think sometimes people have a hard time knowing how to start out. And I think both of you, those are just two perfect examples of how is no one right path. And so if you have any sort of words of advice that you'd share for someone who might be trying to break their way into this field.
I would say like just continue to follow your curiosity and the things that light you up. And even if something in the moment might not seem directly related to what you've just done or where you're trying to go next, like it's all part of the journey, and one way or another you'll get there. Yeah.
Um, I would definitely agree with what Amanda said. I would also say apply to things you don't think you're qualified for. You probably have imposter syndrome. We all do, but go for it. And then I would also say, if you find organizations that you feel like have a really healthy work culture, hold that close to your heart, because the nonprofit circle can be a little bit brutal, and there's a lot of burnout. And so something I appreciate about TNC is that people have a really great work-life balance. Um, and I think a lot of people trying to enter this field might get caught up in some of those cycles. So, protect your own mental health and everything.
Great advice. Absolutely. Another question that's a little more focused back on the actual projects that you both worked on. This attendee loved hearing about your work looking at extreme heat, Tara, and about the living shoreline work, Amanda, and was curious if you see how you see nature-based climate solutions work expanding, and if there's more you can say about that topic.
I can say, at least for extreme heat and things like air quality and things like that, I think that nature-based solutions are the way to go. Like, that is the future. I think there's so many benefits, and I think people are realizing too that when you think about like what you want the place where you live to look like, what you're picturing is not like machines everywhere, but it's, a park that you can play in and things like that. And I have been encouraged by political leaders seeming to like jump on that trend. And I think Emily can correct me, but I don't think it was introduced that long ago as a concept. And so like I anticipate it becoming more and more involved in the future, and like people really jumping on the nature-based solutions train.
Yeah, I think of it as just all the different tools in the toolkits, like especially within the coastal space, restoration is one tool, aquaculture is another tool, living shorelines is another tool. And it's really about how all these different approaches come together. And I think as like the biodiversity crisis is getting more attention in addition to the climate change crisis, nature-based solutions will continue to rise in prominence, and also at least with like the living shorelines work that we do now, like trying to come across a consensus about design standards and putting in more research and monitoring as well for these nature-based solutions is going to be a big part of public outreach and getting more people on board, and having it be not just within the environmental field or like the nonprofit field, but also just incorporated into development and just other sectors as well.
Thank you both. Great insight. Our next nature-based solutions professionals here. What are your goals for your remaining time at TNC and past your time with us as part of the fellowship?
I can also go first. I think, well, part of my fellowship being to match the legislative timeline, I'm really looking forward to seeing how that works out. And all of the bills that I've been involved in, I mean, it's like a stretch goal because I don't have that much control, but I would love to see one of them passed, and see that process. And then also, I think just like utilize TNC's, because we're global and also in all 50 states, like utilize the resources from all of that and like meet as many people as possible. I'm really interested in how we like sort of fit into that national puzzle, and like the regional collaboration that's going on. And so yeah, I think one of my goals would just be to learn as much as possible about that, and then obviously explore more of TNC lands and have more opportunities to be in the field. I want to go with Amanda to go, look at oysters. So looking forward to that. Hopefully I'll get out to the Cape and the vineyards and in the water and just like experience as much of it as possible. And then I really enjoyed the work that I'm doing, so I'd love to continue doing similar things in the future, however I can. Yeah.
Yeah, I second that, Tara. I'd love to go out to the properties on the vineyard. But I think thinking of like the end of the fellowship, there's some more concrete, tangible goals, like getting in all these deliverables for the awards and wrapping them up. But then also trying to do more networking. Just recently, I presented at the Northeast Aquaculture Conference and Exposition, and that was a really great opportunity, and got to meet some really great folks, and have been trying to be in person more and be a part of these meetings more, and conversations to just really get a feel for all the different possible next steps.
Thanks both. And I think since we're getting close to the end, I think one more maybe question from the audience here. As a woman working, or as women working in the field, do you have a mentor or role model for your work?
I don't know if I have a specific person that I can think of. I have a lot of peers that I'm really inspired by who are also in the field in various forms, and they're constantly bringing new things to my attention that, like their niche interest is now my interest. And then in general, I'm involved in the Boston Posse community, which is people of color and environment, and that sort of community is really cool. And I love meeting, people who are further along in their career who are happy to welcome more youth into their space. And yeah, it's been a very welcoming community, and so that's pretty exciting. I can't think of one person. I don't know if I have a personal hero. I'll think about it.
Tara, maybe you could drop in the chat. I don't know if that group has a website. You could maybe drop it in the chat if folks
Yeah,
want to
definitely.
learn more or share that with their networks too. And Amanda, oh, looks like Tina did it maybe, but yeah, Amanda, what about you?
Definitely inspired by all the women in this organization. It's been great too through like different workshops. Like there's an internal engaging across differences workshop, but then also within Massachusetts chapter, there have been some former fellows that we've interacted with who have been like really great mentors and have given great advice about how to have a portfolio and maybe a writing piece and the photo in the field. But also just even outside of TNC, in my undergrad career, I had one TA that I was really close to, and she's been a mentor all throughout. And she's not directly related to conservation, but she is within planetary sciences and climate more generally. And she's also a member of the Shinnecock Nation, and she's just been like a fierce advocate and supporter for my work and also the different things that I do. And so I definitely, there are people I can point to in my life where I'm like, have been really great mentors and reasons why I've stayed in conservation and have pursued my interests.
Thank you both. And I think that's such a great reminder for all of us that you never know whose life and career you're impacting through your relationships and interactions with folks. Oh, thank you. I know there are just a couple questions still that we didn't get to, but I think it's time to wrap up. So please feel free, if your question wasn't answered, to reach out to us and we will make sure to get you an answer. But since we are approaching the end of our time today, I wanted to make sure that we had just a few minutes still for Tara and Amanda for you to share any final thoughts with the group here.
Such a good question. I think final thoughts. This has just been a really great experience. We're like a little over halfway through, so I'm excited to see what happens in the second half of our fellowship. And thank you all for your support in the chat. I see a lot of fun questions and comments, and I really appreciate it. So thank you for coming to hear what we do.
Yeah, it's been a really positive experience. And I've also appreciated just how adaptive it has been too. Like it's been a learning experience for everyone, but definitely there's been so much support all throughout. And it's been great to share some of our work and yeah, looking forward to the rest of it. So
Thank you, Tara and Amanda, both for your great presentations today and for your really true contributions that you're making to the chapter. This is really real important work you're doing, and we're really grateful that you have devoted your energy and time and passions to us here in Massachusetts. So thank you so much. We're really glad to have you. And thank you everyone who joined us today for the webinar. Thank you to everyone who supports TNC so that we can do all this great work, and to all of our Legacy Club members who've joined us today. We really can't do this work without all of you and your support. And if anyone is interested in future fellowship opportunities with TNC, keep an eye on our website. We'll be sending everyone a follow-up email over the coming days with a link to a recording of this webinar so you can watch it again or share with your friends and networks. And if you're enjoying our webinar, please be sure to share them, and you can follow us on social media to learn more about what we're doing. We are on Facebook and Instagram at conserve_MA, and you can find there more information on our work and updates on upcoming virtual opportunities to connect with us. And as always, you can register for future webinar opportunities at nature.org/MA webinars. During our next webinar, which will be on April 25th, we'll be joined by TNC in Massachusetts Director of Rivers and Lands, Barbara Cherry, for a look at how TNC's 2030 goals are guiding our work in the state. And so we hope you'll be able to join us then. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Tara and Amanda, and I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.